This is Hody Jones, and if you were to ask the average One Piece fan who the worst arc antagonist is, I would bet so many units of currency that Hody Jones would be the most common answer. And the crazy thing is, all of those people are wrong. Hody Jones is misunderstood, not because of who he is, but because of what he represents, and how Eiichiro Oda may very well have created a villain who is too smart for One Piece. And today we're going to discover why, because we are on a mission to rank every major antagonist in the most comprehensive and exhaustive way possible, video by video, this time featuring the all of the that is Hody Jones. So let's set the stage. Hody Jones is the main antagonist of what was at the time the highly anticipated Fishman Island arc. The Straw Hats reunite after 2 years of training, set sail to Fishman Island, and find themselves caught up in a revolution led by Hody Jones, who believes that he has been anointed by the sea heavens to guide fishmen on a brutal crusade to eradicate humanity. TLDR, he's not a very nice man. So Luffy beats him, Hody goes to jail, and also he's an old man now because of reasons, and that's that. Job done. At least that's how a lot of people seem to think it goes. But there is actually a lot going on here. More so than most One Piece arcs, and more so than most One Piece villains. Hody Jones is probably the most unique antagonist in One Piece, and it's not just because he has 2 penises, which Eiichiro Oda revealed in the SBS Volume 75 because it is information that we all need to know. But let's start at the surface. The moment that Hody Jones waddled his way into the manga, he was immediately branded by the fans as Fat Arlong, the before image in Arlong's inspirational weight loss journey. And he could not get away from Arlong. It's a comparison that Oda himself made when Hody is speaking on a page and Nami sees Arlong speaking behind him. Usopp then goes on to say, those fishmen want to pick up where Arlong left off, and this comparison to Arlong is key to understanding the initial wave of disappointment, as this arc was the very first full-length post-time skip arc. So readers were looking forward to seeing our brand new Straw Hats go all out and show off their wonderfully shiny techniques against new powerful opponents. This was the new world after all, so look, who's up first? Are we gonna take out a worst generation member, or maybe another warlord like Doflamingo? Ooh, that would be cool. Actually, you know what? What if we go straight for the head of an Emperor of the Sea? There is so much potential to be had here, and the answer we eventually got when reading Weekly was, nah mates, we're gonna do Arlong again. Except this time longer and wider. Longer story and wider stomach, that is. Which I don't think was an amazing start to the second half of the series. Not only did it feel like we weren't progressing, but it actively felt like taking a step back in some ways, because we were dealing with the Arlong we have at home. This is an impression that I think Hody really struggled and ultimately didn't quite overcome in the minds of many fans. But we are going to fix that. The first common criticism for Hody Jones being a bad villain is his motivation or overly simplistic lack thereof. Hody is usually remembered as the racism villain. In fact, in the One Piece wiki, under the personality section, the first 4 words are, Hody is a racist. However, I believe that underplays the severity of his condition. And shockingly, nowhere in that One Piece wiki article do they address the core of the character that the article's about. What people don't talk about enough, if at all, with Hody Jones starts at religion, as Hody spent his childhood being preached to, and one of the head priests was Arlong himself, who said, this is a holy war. Long ago, the scum known as mankind feared and envied the superior fishmen who had been granted natural strength. The humans are terrified of the judgment they know is coming, for our moment of vengeance. So there's a lot to unpack there, but most importantly, this issue isn't as basic as Hody was a racist. It's that he was relentlessly indoctrinated into this belief as a child. His will was stolen away from him and replaced with a prison of ideas. But this is also what made Hody such a fantastic soldier. The Minister of the Right, which I always forget which one, I think it's the Seahorse one. In either case, one of them even stated that Hody Jones was one of the king's finest soldiers, and of course he was. Having grown up with this extremist religious mindset, Hody follows orders unquestioningly, and his devotion would be unparalleled. So long as he saw a course of action as being on the right path, Hody Jones would excel at implementing said action. But when it comes to religion, you usually need something a bit higher to believe in, like some sort of savior or messiah. And so Hody's faction started to believe that the messiah figure who would lead them would be Fisher Tiger. Although when Tiger died, Zeo said, so Tiger wasn't our chosen hero either. And that's a problem. If not him, then who would be the chosen one? Well, obviously Hody himself, when he gets a hold of the energy steroids and claims, finally, the heavens have chosen us and given us power. Now, before we move on, there is a lot more blame to be thrown around here, because it's not not just fishermen who created Hody. In fact, Hody was radicalized just as much by the world government as he was from the hateful faction of fishermen. Whilst Fisher Tiger and the Sun Pirates were active, the world government and Big News Morgans did everything they could to paint them as brutal monsters. They would publish stories to dehumanize the Sun Pirates as much as possible, despite the fact that Fisher Tiger had a very strict code of morality that he would adhere to, which was no killing and no unnecessary brutality. Their goal was to free slaves, to stop suffering rather than deliberately inflict more of it. But that is not the Fisher Tiger that Hody Jones got to know. All he read about in the propaganda-filled newspapers was about a vengeance-filled monster that the world government feared. So Hody grew up believing that their lies were the correct way to act, that fishermen had to be as brutal as possible towards humans because that's what his savior was doing. Hody Jones was quite literally radicalized by fake news. This was news designed to scare humans, to galvanize support for the world government, but it had the unintended effect of inspiring Hody. It gave him a role model and a path forward. And also, one pivotal piece of misinformation was when Fisher Tiger's death was reported, and it was stated that he died because humans had refused to give him blood. Of course, we know that it's because Tiger himself refused human blood, but this one was Arlong's lie, which he told to protect Fisher Tiger's reputation. Otherwise, it would have gotten out that he had been a slave. And all of this context and experience is what Hody Jones was completely lacking. All he read in the newspapers is that humans doomed Fisher Tiger, his hero, whose mission was to slaughter each and every one of them, and now someone would have to take up that mantle. Hody Jones is a product of his environment, but here's the most important thing. This is the key to appreciating the majesty of Hody Jones, which is that it's not about Hody at all. Chapter 643 is called Phantom. This also happens to be the chapter where Robin called Jinbei a quote handsome man and started a whole new shipping industry that endures to this very day. But it's called Phantom because this is where Prince Fukaboshi reveals the true nature of Hody Jones. Hody is a monster born from his environment. The new fisherman pirates are monsters created by hatred. They live in fear of their ancestors' hatred being forgotten, live in fear of the days that anger at the humans is forgotten. They live in the hope that their holy war is just, that humans are evil. They desire blood. They don't even want peace for Fishman Island. This hatred they wield is entirely void of any kind of experience and will. Hody is entirely empty. There is no substance within him. That last line in particular is often directly quoted when people complain about Hody online. It's often said that, mate, Hody is such a bad villain that even the author admits he lacks substance. But that is exactly the point. I often hear and even say that the best written villains are the ones you can understand, not the ones you can agree or empathize with, but the ones whose actions you at least understand. And I think that is usually true, which makes Hody Jones a very challenging idea because people try to understand him. However, it's a pointless exercise because he is not the true villain here. So this is going to sound wanky, be prepared for that, but the true villain of Fishman Island is hatred itself. Hody Jones is but a phantom, a lingering presence of the hatred of the past, continuously sustaining itself so as not to be forgotten. Hody himself has no substance, so if you go looking for any, then yes, you're going to be disappointed. Which is why I really don't like it when people boil Hody down to being a racist. He isn't just a racist, it is so much worse than that. He is hatred incarnate. He is the inherited hatred of generations and generations of fishermen. As an individual, Hody himself doesn't even know why he's doing the things it is that he does. At one point, he even admits that humans have never done anything to him, a point that the anime adaptation goes on to ruin by showing a filler scene of humans trying to kidnap Hody and his friends. But as far as the manga goes, no human has ever done a bad thing or indeed even a thing to Hody Jones. In fact, over the course of his career, Hody has damaged almost exclusively fishermen, which in theory that should be a big no-no for his cause. And there's even one part where Ha-Chang compares him to Arlong, and he stated that Arlong would never harm his fellow fishermen. However, Hody would immediately kill anyone who showed even a hint of sympathy towards humans. To Hody, it doesn't matter, because he's not doing this for the reasons that he says he is. He doesn't have some grand vision for a fisherman utopia. No, he spreads hatred purely for the sake of cultivating more hatred. He is a metaphorical flame trying desperately not to die out, to burn as much as possible around him him until nothing is left. And I think this is best depicted near the end of Fishman Island, where it's almost like Hody is being possessed by a demon. He loses what little facade of individuality he had and becomes something completely unrecognizable and not of this world. And something very clever that Oda does is with the Jolly Roger of the new Fishman Pirates. Jolly Rogers in One Piece are the representation of the captain. Your classic one is the Straw Hat Pirates portraying Luffy, but you've also got the Red Hair Pirates evoking Shanks, or even the Fire Tank Pirates honoring their meticulously well-built father. The new Fishman Pirates Jolly Roger is one of only 3 in the entire series that does not adhere to the standard. Their Jolly Roger is a decapitated human, which is because even though Hody is the captain, the crew isn't guided by him. They are guided by their desire to kill humans. And this is of course in direct contrast to the Sun Pirates, another of the 3 exceptions, who chose to embody the sun as their figurehead, signifying that they act for a greater future where fishermen can eventually live in peace under the sun. Neither crew exists for the individual but for the idea. And what this means is that there just isn't a lot to grab onto with Hody himself. As an idea phantom, he is deliberately designed to lack a compelling personality. He doesn't have the charisma of a crocodile, the flamboyancy of a flamingo, or even the comic timing of a fox. Hody has no redeeming qualities, and that's a purposeful choice for the themes of the story that he was charged with telling, which he does really well. Although doing something well and being able to satisfy an audience are 2 different things, which we'll get to, but I will say that Hody being a phantom makes Luffy fighting with him so much more complicated than most antagonists. With your classics like Crocodile, Doflamingo, and Crocodile again, the clear solution has always been to punch them into submission and have a big old party afterwards. But you can't punch an idea. Or I guess you can punch the idea's vessel, but you only risk making that idea stronger. As Jinbei says, if Luffy, the person who beat Arlong, waltzed in with his rubber member swinging about and used it to beat Hody, then it could make things significantly worse. Because then it's another case of a human coming in to oppress any fishman who dared stand against them. Luffy beating Hody here would, yes, temporarily save the kingdom, but it would birth hundreds, perhaps even thousands of future Hodys. The flame of hatred would live on. So this situation needed to be handled as delicately as possible. And in a way, Hody is one of Luffy's toughest opponents, because simply beating him isn't enough. Something needs to be done to change the perspective of those around Hody before all of the punching happens, which for the people not on board with all of the ideas and themes only serves to slow the arc down. One of the most common criticisms of Fishman Island is that it takes too long, but it's only 51 chapters, which is shorter than the Enies Lobby arc. So I think the more accurate criticism would be that it doesn't take too long, but it does take too long to get to the parts that a lot of One Piece readers are looking for, aka the big lore drops and the action, because Fishman Island elects to spend most of its time setting up and exploring the deeper arc themes. But on top of that, when the action does happen, it comes with this familiar taste of disappointment. One of the trickiest Hody complaints is that he wasn't a challenge to the crew. Not a single one of them faced any real difficulty in their fight against the new Fishman Pirates, and I get that. And this is where Hody falls into a bit of an awkward spot, because the first post-time skip arc was always going to be like this. The Straw Hats didn't train for 2 years to be pushed to their absolute limits by the very first ne'er-do-wells they came across, which is exactly what happened in East Blue. For the most part, that saga was a breeze, and Luffy wasn't pushed to his limits until Crocodile. The difference is that it's more forgivable because arcs in East Blue only last about a quarter of the length that Fishman Island was. So what we have here is a post-time skip sized arc with an East Blue caliber ending. Exploring deep ideas is great, but One Piece is also a shonen manga, and the standard formula, including the fights, are a huge reason why a lot of people read it. And I can absolutely understand how Hody didn't land in that regard, although I do think it would have been the same for any antagonist in his position. Whoever they encountered was always going to be wiped. It just happened to be Hody. So let's talk about drugs. Complaint number whatever we're up to with Hody is the energy steroids, which are kind of like going Sulong for fishmen. There's a general sense that they feel a bit cheap, as if Oda realized that the post-time skip Straw Hats weren't going to get a challenge, so it was thrown in for the sake of dramatic tension. That and an excuse to change Hody's design into something a bit more threatening. But I think that thematically, the energy steroids are pretty perfect. These drugs serve as a metaphor for Hody's ambition. First of all being that he lacks it. He has no substance within himself, so he needs an external substance to make up for that lack of substance. But also the idea of success, but at what cost and for what purpose? The answer being that there is no purpose and it's a huge cost. Great. That's just what Hody is. Everything he does is fabricate. Like when he fabricated hate towards humans by killing Otohime and blaming a human. Everything about him is a facade. So I think it's really on point that his physical power is also fake and granted to him artificially via fish pills. One Piece is a series where strength is directly conjured from willpower, drive, and desire. And Hody, he has none of those things, so of course his power needs to be artificial as well. Having brought up Otohime though, Hody is set up as the direct antithesis of Princess Shirahoshi. Right before the arc climax begins, Shirahoshi revealed that she'd always known it was Hody who killed her mother, but Shirahoshi refused to say anything because she made a promise to Otohime that, no matter who killed her, she wouldn't hate them. So you have Hody, a man who is the embodiment of hatred, being directly opposed by Shirahoshi, who is incapable of hate. Hody and Shirahoshi are two very well written sides of the same narrative coin. The existence of one directly makes the other stronger via juxtaposition. However, this doesn't necessarily make Hody a stronger character to many, because Shirahoshi is also an often complained about and misunderstood character, so having her as Hody's counterbalance is just adding another layer of polarization to the discussion. And then there's expectations. Something to remember is that back in the day, it's been a long time now, Fishman Island was an arc that came with more anticipation than any other, because we've been talking about going there ever since the days of East Blue, and the goal was to get there after setting sail from Water 7. That was the intended destination before Thriller Bark, Sabadi, and then that big old wall got in the way. So it was a location built up for over a decade. The only other comparison I can really think of being Wano, which was an arc built up over a similar amount of time. And what we got from Wano was the sort of thing that people expected from Fishman Island, simply due to how long Oda had been teasing readers with it. So even though Oda delivered a great story with exceptionally well thought out characters, and again, easily the most unique villain in the series to this day, it wasn't what a lot of readers were looking for at the time. So look, I don't want to say that Hody Jones is too smart for One Piece, because that sounds very pretentious, but at the same time, I do think that Hody was a little bit too smart of an idea for One Piece. He's what I describe as an intangible villain. He's a vessel for the idea. You can't view him as a character. He's a phantom. He's a living metaphor, and his role is written to perfection to express the idea that Oda wanted to put on page. So in a way, it's okay for him to be a forgettable and underwhelming villain, because he himself was never meant to make an impact. He was the Amazon delivery package that contained the thing it is you actually wanted, the idea. And Fishman Island was about overcoming the lingering ghosts of hatred within both Fishman and human society so we can move on to build a better world. Of course, that makes our ultimate task here very difficult, because as I've stated, I think that Hody Jones nailed exactly what Oda intended him to do. But he exists in a series of very different expectations. Readers go into One Piece arcs with certain expectations, many of which Hody did not meet, and he provided something different and unique, which was always going to be polarizing by nature. I, for example, really appreciate what Hody did, but I would never claim that he was one of my top favorite villains. In the end, he's less of a character and more of a thematic vehicle, which means that I don't think Hody can go any further than a C tier, because he's a fantastic, well-executed idea that came at the cost of his character. But you let me know in the comments which villain you'd like to see ranked next.